Hi there, welcome back to MindMomBodyRN, and we have Adam back with us. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Adam is one of my very, very dear friends from graduate school. We actually became therapists together, and he also is a coach for MMBRN. And Adam is here today to actually help me talk about me. We're going to share a little bit of my story and kind of how I got into, being so passionate about breaking generational trauma and gentle parenting and that stuff. So, and Adam is a licensed marriage and family therapist. So you get to see a real life therapy session just kind of on film, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Licensed to ask very specific questions.
Yes. Yes. So I guess just briefly, some of my background. My parents got divorced when I was 7, but they had been separated for a year and a half before then. My mom originally had a pretty severe psychotic break, and she was heavily on drugs, and she found this hotel for us in Lumberton, North Carolina, where my dad couldn't find us. And we were kind of hiding out there, and I was 6, and she had let me get 2-inch acrylic nails. I was wearing stilettos. I had makeup on. She'd let me dye my hair black in the hotel bathroom. And she was just really sleeping a lot. She'd wake up to use drugs and then go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And she had a restraining order against my dad because he had threatened to kill her. Rightfully so. You get a restraining order against someone like that.
Yep.
So my dad had actually had to hire security because he couldn't be around us. So he hired security to come post out at that hotel because 80% of the sex work that takes place in the town of Lumberton, 80% of it takes place in that kind of down that road of hotels, right? It's kind of the way it is. So my dad was very concerned, she's going to get kidnapped. Something's going to happen to her. And so there was a guy that he hired, a PI, 24/7, and the guy found the window that was outside of the hotel room, but it was the hallway one. And he had said that he would see me come out and buy food from the vending machines. This is 6-year-old me.
Mm-hmm.
And
real quick, bring the mic a little bit closer to you. Just there you go. That's good.
If you stop
That's
me. Good. Okay. Okay. So, so I'm 6 years old. So my mom's an active drug user. She's passed out. I'm eating off of vending machines, very inappropriate, whatever. And I think about there were a lot of sex workers around me at that hotel. Yeah. And so I was kind of seeing what they were dressed like. And it was very, glitzy. And I was kind of trying to emulate them. So my dad had that. And finally he was able to have enough proof. The PI had taken enough pictures that they were able to get an emergency hearing with the court to say Rachel's in danger. My mother was not a fit parent. And my dad needed to get me back. And on paper that sounds really good, but I think that looking back at it, it was very much my dad didn't want me back. He just wanted to win.
Sure. And
he was so angry at my mom for not wanting to be with him anymore that he just wanted her to pay,
Yeah.
and instead of getting her help, the greatest way that he could make her pay was taking me from her,
Yeah.
But I remember being relieved to see my dad because it was okay, somebody's going to make sure that I have meals. Somebody's going to wash my clothes, And I remember being so sad to say goodbye to my mom, but also just so happy because I was okay, I'm going to be taken care of now. Mm-hmm. And so we go back, we fly home. That was in North Carolina. We fly home to my grandparents' house in Iowa. And I'm having to soak off my nails. They're taking me to the hair place to try and get the black out of my hair. Just all the things. They had to buy me a whole new set of age-appropriate clothes. But that was also a really hard spot for me because I had seen a lot of adult things. Yeah. And I wanted to talk about the things that I had seen or that had gone on. And I was constantly told that's adult conversation. You just need to forget about all that. So it was I had these fucking, where the fuck is my mom?
Right.
And my dad was very just much you'll probably never see her again. She's not a good person. Okay, So my dad just villainized her. And to the point where it was like almost a game in his head where she was the enemy. And she'd ask me like, hey, are any of the, because sometimes I would get to talk to her. After about 6 months, I'd get to talk to her. And she'd say like, are our old family pictures up at your new house? Do you get to see them? And I remember I like looked around and I'm like, oh yeah, one of them's up. And my dad is like, she's trying to find us. Like, and she's in assisted living in like North Carolina, whatever. I feel like I'm putting a lot of like this chaoticness together, like just piecing it together. But so actually after my dad had gotten me back, my mom left and she kind of really had a psychotic break at that point. And she was doing sex work in Nashville at a truck stop. And she was doing that for quite a few months and then sleeping at a homeless shelter at night. And it's like then my aunt found her, but my mom has always kind of faded in and out. And I remember my dad telling me once, like, we don't know if she's dead or alive. You just need to forget about her, because he got remarried to a woman who was like a wicked stepmother to me. Yeah. And he's like, you need to call her mom now. And if you don't call her mom, then you can call her Mrs. Woolbrink. Yeah, it was just like, let's blend a family, but we're going to like rapid fire do this. And it's like, I didn't want to call her parents Grandma and Grandpa. I had always called them Tony and Gradette. And I remember one time I was like, bye, Tony. And my dad was like, it was like, you can either call him Mr. Oliva or Grandpa, and you're going to do 30 push-ups right now because you called him Tony. It was so weird. The control and craziness and the mental gymnastics.
Well, yeah. It's just throwing the family in like a blender, trying to blend it instead of just nicely tossing it.
Right.
Like a salad.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And Anita, who was my stepmom, had come into the marriage with a son. And my dad really took on immediately disciplining her son. Before they were married, I remember this poor little boy had done something to me that little boys do. I mean, he was 2, 3 at the time, pulled my hair or something. He was a wild little boy, but like pulled my hair. And my dad wanted him to apologize. And I remember he said, apologize. And Yoel, my stepbrother, was just sobbing. He's 2.5 years old, sobbing. And he can't get the words out to apologize. So my dad bends him over and just pounds the shit out of his ass. Just, it had to kill. I could see how bad it was hurting him. Stood him up again and said, are you ready to apologize? And Yoel's like in shock. Well, yeah. He's just like, finally, Yoel is able to muster a sorry after my dad has pounded his ass like 4 times. That kid had to have a bruised up backside, 2.5 years old. And I think that my stepmom saw that, and she was so scared of being abandoned by my dad, but she knew she didn't want her son to be in the line of fire for that. Right. That immediately after that, I was always the villain. And I think that it was, with all like the training we've had and experience we've had, and looking back now, it's like, I think she was trying to keep her son safe. But that then turned into, I was the problem with everything. Right. And there were a lot of really abusive, traumatic moments that happened. I'm estranged from both my parents. And it's not because my mom was into sex work or anything like that. It's just because I can't keep a healthy relationship with her. And my dad, it's because I'm not safe. I don't feel safe with him. So growing up, there was a lot of corporal punishment. And when I say like corporal punishment, I don't just mean like spankings. I mean like, I would have to watch what clothes I wore to school to cover up bruises. It was, I complained about eating dinner one time, what we were having for dinner. So then it was like, okay, you cannot eat for 2 weeks. And I was still able to eat hot lunch at school. But other than that, my dad would leave a Flintstone vitamin and a glass of water every day in my room for 2 weeks. And I ate my hot lunch at school. But other than that, I was grounded for eating for 2 weeks at 8, 9 years old because I had shown like that I was ungrateful for a certain meal. Yeah. And like other things, and that didn't include like the corporal punishment and the absolute mental hell that went along with that, because something would happen at school. I remember I got in trouble at school one time because I said the word ass, and it's like kids say, right? And they found out about it, and my dad was like, I am going to spank the shit out of you every hour for 4 hours until you go to bed. and you're going to sit at that table in between, like, when basically I was going to get beat. And I remember that he would, and this was because I said the word ass at school, and he would set the timer and put it in front of me, and I would watch it click, 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 until I knew that he was going to beat the shit out of me again. And it was like the games, and like, I never felt like I had any autonomy over my own body. And I always remember being like, I don't want to have kids because I don't ever want to hate somebody like this.
Right.
Like, he hates me. But it was also so confusing because I wanted his love and approval so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what kids want. One thing that I really would like to address that happened, as I've talked about before, that I'm fearful that my dad would have at times taken my life, and I'm fearful in speaking out now. He would love to just kill me. He would. One time I dropped a bottle of Adderall on the floor. For people who don't know, it's like Ritalin. It's an amphetamine. I dropped a bottle on the floor, and I had picked 13 of them up. And there were 11 left on the floor that I hadn't caught, 10 or 11. And he found them, like, where I had scattered them. They had kind of like fallen, some under my dresser. And he found all of those, and he made me take them one after another. And he said, you're either going to be awake for a very long time, or you're not going to wake up. And it's going to look like you did it to yourself. And I remember just sitting in my room all night, because, like, here I am, like, 12-year-old me, pumped to the fucking gills with amphetamines.
Yeah.
And I'm sweating, and my heart's pounding. And I remember, like, praying, like, please let me live through this night.
Yeah.
And also, at the same time, it crossed my mind, should I leave a note? And then thinking, like, my childhood self, I had such loyalty to him still that I was like, no, I wouldn't want him to get in trouble if I died. Like, so much fucked upness.
Yeah. So
much cruelty. And that's not like a one-off. That's an example of an incidence, you know.
Right.
With the food insecurity that I had. It's not that we didn't have food. It was that it was used as a thing. There were times where I would hide food in my room because I was scared. There'd be times I wouldn't eat. And I remember, like, I had hidden some Girl Scout cookies and, like, a Mountain Dew, and I had hid it in, like, this duffel bag. And I remember he and my stepmom found it because they would raid my room. Just like a drill sergeant would raid something, I'd have room raids every so often.
Yeah.
And usually they would find food. They would find food, or, to be honest, they would find tampons, because I wasn't allowed to use tampons, but we had swimming at school, and I was super embarrassed, and so my friend was like, just use tampons. So my friend gave me some tampons, and I was like, okay, I can do this for swimming, whatever, which is like, it was terrifying to me to even talk to them about that. And then they were like, you have tampons? You're a whore, you know? Like, yeah. What? But I remember specifically one time they found the Girl Scout cookies, and they found the Mountain Dew. And I remember sitting there while he just shoved cookies in my mouth, like, you like these? And she was like, yeah, you want to eat these? You're going to eat them all now. Shoving cookies in my mouth. Like, the second I could swallow and get a breath, they were shoving more cookies in my mouth. And then he cracked open the can of Mountain Dew and just poured the whole thing over my head, and then crushed the can and threw it next to me. And so I would say I've had some trauma.
Maybe.
Yeah, right? A little traumatic. And I remember a lot of times knowing my dad always had a handgun with him. They were never locked up. Yeah. And I remember just the knowing of how much power he had at all times to take our lives. Like, yeah. And he has a new family now, and I don't know what's going on with that new family, but what I do know is that, you know, It's hard for me because it's like, from what I see on social media, he has a new daughter that he's completely head over heels for. And I'm never going to be the daughter he wanted. I was always too much of a tramp at 9, too much of a tramp at 9, too much like my mother. I had a severe learning disability that was not diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And so another, like, my scheduled beatings is what I would call them, is every report card, you know, I had anything less than a C, was getting beat for that. And also, they charged me for poor grades. So not only was I like struggling to get good grades, but if I got a C, that cost me like $20. If I got a D, that was $25. And I, failed a class, that was $50. And so the babysitting money that I was working for, they took from me too. So it was just like I couldn't win.
Yeah.
And I don't say this to be like, feel bad for me. I say this to be like, for people that are listening, like, the horrible things that happen to you, like, don't have to define that. And, like, I had a really hard time with the idea of becoming a mother or a father because I didn't know what is that supposed to look like? I was terrified.
Right.
And I think that for me to have found this whole idea of gentle parenting and this whole idea of breaking generational trauma and truly being able to say, like, the buck stops here, like, this shit stops with me, has been, like, a big part of how I got into this.
Right.
I want you to now ask me questions.
Well, I mean...
Sorry, I feel like I just trauma dumped on you. I'm sorry.
I mean, you did, but that's kind of the point, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
So, well, I guess with speaking about generational trauma, like, where do you see it showing up in yourself? Like, how has it been passed to you? So what do you need to do to stop it?
Yeah, it is definitely, so I have 3 kids now. Mm-hmm. And having children, they are definitely a mirror. Every time you look at them, you take a very hard look in the mirror at yourself. And so instead of looking away from the mirror, or kind of, I think a lot of times, what happens with people with narcissistic tendencies, especially, is their children can't be separate entities from them. Sure. Their children are either bad or they're something they're proud of, something they can brag on, an extension of themselves.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, and I don't like to say this a lot, but what the fuck I said was, not only am I going to be super successful and learn how to do this fucking right, I'm going to be super successful and I'm not going to let you take any of the credit for it.
Sure, yeah.
Because, like, you did not help me get here, sir. Mike Wolbrink, you did not help me get here, okay? Like, and anyone that is interested, he owns Younger Gun Works, and he really shouldn't legally be opening that gun shop. So anybody that wanted to say, sir, I'm very concerned about you having a firearms store, I would welcome you to do that. That was just a tangent, but... Yeah, I'm breaking it because so much of Eloise, I was so triggered when I first had her. And that was after I had done 4 years of intense therapy and had become a therapist. And I was still triggered by Eloise. And I had to do a lot of work in being like, why is this triggering for me? And then I realized I was seeing parts of myself that I didn't like in her, but I didn't not like them because they're not likable or they're not redeeming qualities. Mm-hmm. I had a trigger. I was triggering and I was kind of having all these issues because it was the parts of myself that, like, my loudness and my, like, ability to take up space in a room and my ability to, like, lead. Those were all characteristics that were like, this is bad. You need to humble down. Like, my inquisitiveness, like being like, well, religion, if Jesus loves everyone, why is this like this? No, I was told that I just needed to shut the fuck up, And I was just like, when Eloise would take up space, I found myself being like angry about it. And I had to think about, like, why is this bringing up this feeling? And then I had to be like, oh my God, because she's doing what I was doing and I got in trouble for it. But she doesn't need to get in trouble for it. Right. And not only that, but I didn't deserve to get in trouble for it. And so it's like we have these visceral reactions so often as parents that we don't know where they're coming from, but we lash out. Mm-hmm. But the gift in breaking generational trauma is, one, feeling your own shit, feeling it, healing it, and not passing it on. Right. But feeling it is taking, like, a step. Before I would, like, freak out at Eloise or tell her no or tell her to be quiet. First, I have to be like, and it becomes a habit form, you know what I mean? Like, it becomes a habit where before you lash out and have a response, you think, like, is she doing something or is this bringing up something in me? me.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of becomes just second nature where you're able to, before you have those visceral reactions, you get in the habit of being in your mind and checking yourself and being like, no, this isn't even about me. Like, you know, and instead finding connection with our children instead. If Eloise is doing something, I assume unconditional positive regard for my children at all times. Even if she's teasing someone or she's doing something, I do not believe that Eloise intentionally is setting out to do wrong things or hurt people. And because I treat her like that, I've never really had very many problems. And that applies to all my kids. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of curious in what has your experience been in clients you've seen in effective strategies in breaking that generational trauma?
I mean, I don't know that I've had a ton of clients specifically trying to address that, but I think it still shows up in ways where we haven't named it that, but that's what's happening, right? Because I hear plenty of things about people's traumas and the things they've gone through, and then part of it is them, noticing their feelings and behaviors partially as their own therapy, and kind of talking to that too, like the more you notice it, almost the slower the thought process goes, so that you can actually start catching yourself feeling things or thinking things before there's any kind of reaction. And so then, like, when I've had the clients and they're interacting with their kids a certain way, I remember there was one family where it was like, both parents were kind of like filling a role in terms of like the fun one or the disciplinarian. And, they didn't feel like things were going super well. And as we worked through things and found out that they were almost like taking each other's roles, like the other one did better as the one that's more of the disciplinarian, and the other one did better as the fun parent. But because their dynamics were shifted, it was kind of messing with things. And so like once we kind of got them squared away and they fit into their roles better, disciplinarian didn't mean like they're hitting or doing anything like that, but like they're in charge of like setting, okay, well, you didn't do your schoolwork, so you don't get to play your video games right now. You got to do your schoolwork first. Right. But part of it's just noticing, like, when there's the estrangement with parents or just a tough relationship with parents, and then those clients are talking about their interactions with their kid, them saying like, well, my parent did this, so I want to make sure I don't do that, or here's the things that were good and I want to make sure to do those too. And so it's like, that's part of it. And other parts of it are, what was it that you didn't like about what your parent did before? And what was it? What didn't you like? What did it do to you, or what did it create within you? And then how are you seeing that come to life? And so what is it that you're actually not trying to do?
Can you give us an example of a client, like, and you don't have to like use names, but you can can you make up or give an example of a client where all of that, you saw that as the therapist, where of course you don't see it when you're living it and it's your mind, right? Mm-hmm. Can you give kind of like what that looks like?
I got to think of one. Let me just run through absolutely everyone I've ever seen.
I know there's that client you have that you showed that thing from Encanto, and she's dealing with a lot and like not having positive regard from both her parents. And what is that kind of playing out?
Yeah. Yeah, that one's a little different. But I think part of it's just that there hasn't been like an abuse sort of situation or anything like that, but there's been other traumas in their past and just a weird relationship with parents. And so part of that is like, culturally they are from not the United States. I'm just going to be very vague. And so like their ways of growing up and their ways of community are just different than things are here. And so then clients a first generation American citizen. And so like for them, it's been weird trying to like balance being here, but also having some of the like other traditional family values and all that. Yeah,
their family's cultural identity. Yeah.
Right. Yep. And so like with that, and then parents like adjusting to and like holding both, but holding them differently than the client is, then there's a weirdness there. And so for that client, part of it's been just trying to recognize what her connection is to the family and how it's hard to say this without being specific. Basically just recognize where they're at and how they've been doing okay despite everything that's been going on. Yeah. Because like, you know, relationships with parents and siblings and friends and just people in general is always a little bit confusing. And so like part of it's been us taking a step back and looking at like, okay, all of these relationships are difficult right now, but like, what is it that you're doing in each of these relationships? And what is it that you're actually trying to get? Yeah. Because a lot of the time we'll be talking about the drama of the different relationships, but when we can pull back and look at like, what is it that you feel like you're missing, or what is it that you're trying to get? And then it's like, oh, well, that's all of this coming from friends and other things is tied to attachment stuff with your parents. Yeah.
In like mother wounds and father wounds or attachment, like all of those things, has there ever been a time where you've had a client, because Adam works with tons of kids, has there ever been a time where you've really had to sit parents down and be like, a lot of this is, and I'm sure you wouldn't say it this way, but like your kid's not the enemy here?
Yes.
Right? And so how often have you seen kids get scapegoated and, you know, kind of like, what do those conversations look like?
They vary. Mm-hmm. But I've had conversations like that a lot of times, and I usually I'm not always specific in saying like that the kid's being scapegoated, but I'll be like, there's a lot of the issues that are coming up that I'm seeing coming from either the parent to child relationship or just because there's a parent's relationship issue and the kid is acting out because of that. And so almost every time I've seen a kid, I can see the system for what it is and like why they're being that way. Yeah. And it's like, there's plenty of times where they're not even aware of it. They're not really aware why they're doing it or what they're doing that's wrong. They just know they get in trouble all the time or they're the bad kid. Yeah. And it's like, but they're just doing something based off of something that they're feeling on the inside, or some way that their mind is processing how they need to be in the relationship to make it be okay. Yeah. And okay doesn't always mean like good, but it's functioning or it's keeping everyone together. And so I've had, like I said, a lot of different conversations about that. And I know one of my favorite times that I did that, I got fired, which was great. Not fired from where I worked, but
from the
fired
parents.
by the clients. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Do you know how many? Oh my gosh. My parents fired a lot of therapists.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was pretty great. But I remember sitting down and being like, yeah, so I think some of the things going on here just because of, you know, other things. And I think it'd be good if we did some more like family therapy so we can talk through the things. And the client's mom started, I don't remember exactly, but she was half yelling at me and I was just sitting at the table with the rest of the family and she was just standing in a doorway, leaning on the doorway, telling me how I was wrong. And I was like, okay, we'll keep talking. And if you want to join us at some point, let me know. And then she like stormed off and slammed the door. pretty sure she said some rude things, but that was a number of years ago. So I don't remember the details. And I was like, all right. And so I just carried on with the family. And then I came by the next week or something and showed up and then was like some client and dad outside. And I was like, oh, hey, do we have our appointment today? Because they look like they're getting ready to leave. And they're like, oh, I thought we called and canceled all of our remaining appointments. And I was like, you probably did. And then I left. So I was just like,
that's really tickled me.
Yeah.
Oh, how awkward is that when you think you fired someone and you never have to see them again? Then it's like, oh, hey.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mind. It was just kind of like, all right, well, I drove a while to get here. So.
And I'm not getting paid to see this client now. So that kind of sucks.
Yeah. But I think part of it's just that a lot of times parents don't like to hear that anything that they're doing, whether it's their relationship with the kids or their relationship with each other, is causing any sort of negative impact. Because it's like a lot of the time people are doing the best that they know how, but then there's just this missing piece of like, okay, well, if you and your partner aren't doing well, or there's a part of your relationship dynamic that's like off or unhealthy, the kids pick up on it, even if you think that they don't. And then usually their behavior is something that's trying to like meet a need of one of the parents, just depending on who they're more in tune with.
Can you give an example of that? You can make it up.
Okay. So let's say we've got just parents and they don't spend a ton of time together. And they don't really like sit and play with kids. It's more so that they like, you know, they expect the kids to entertain themselves, and they expect that their relationship is good. They don't really go on dates, so they're just disconnected. I guess more of like a parents are roommates situation, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so then a lot of the time what happens for the kid in that situation is that they don't necessarily like consciously know this. They couldn't articulate it exactly, but they notice that parents either don't get along or they don't spend good time together, and they also feel disconnected from the parents. Mm-hmm. And so if parents don't give them a lot of positive attention or aren't sitting and playing with them and or otherwise just doing things with them, then that's sometimes when kids will start acting out, or they'll have already acted out, but then that's when they get the interaction from parents, or that's what brings the parents together. It's like, oh, well, if I punch my sister in the face, then my parents get mad and they both come yell at me, and now I have attention and my parents are working together and spending time together.
Yeah.
So then it's like that the kid that's getting in trouble, it's like, oh, you're the problem. You're just being mean all the time. And it's like, okay, well, actually, it's a little true because they're punching their sister in the face, but like at the same time,
where is that coming from?
It's the purpose in there without the kid knowing it is that they're getting the attention that they want, even though it's negative attention, and the parents are working together and being close.
Yeah.
And so it's like things like that.
So that's reassuring. Look, mom and dad can collaborate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
They do know each other. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They can connect.
So then it's like, and that's an oversimplified version, and there's like many more ways that can show up, just depending on like the relationship dynamic between the parents, and then also between parents and kid. Like, I don't know, any system's going to be different and more complex, but
yeah,
that's an example.
I want to ask you a question. As my friend, who's been my friend for a very long time and knows me well, and also as like a therapist, which I know this is like a weird position to put you in, but why do you think my dad hates me?
I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily that he actually hates you.
What is it?
I mean, kind of like was already being said, I'm sure it's generational trauma, right? Like, do you know what his life was like growing up?
I do. And my grandparents, his parents, have been the ones that have like stepped in and like parented me. And my mom's dad always stepped in and parented me when I needed it, you know?
But what was their relationship with him? Bad?
So he says that my grandma, and I get that we can experience our grandparents so differently than how our parents experienced them. My grandpa was a surgeon who was really never home because he was like the chief of surgery. And so he was always working. He was the working dad. And my grandma was home. All I've ever heard my dad say is that his mom never believed him. And so I'm here thinking, like, probably because you're a fucking liar. But like he says that my grandma never believed him. And I think that it comes down to like a high school band teacher he had that was mean to him.
Sure.
And he wouldn't believe him. He's like, no, he purposely is like giving me a hard time, and she would not believe him. And it's really interesting because I remember him telling that story, but then I got to high school and I had a teacher that was really just being mean to me. And he did the same thing. He took the side of the teacher. And it's like, I wonder if that was history, like replaying itself for him somehow, where he was now in the position of power. And it felt good to like make me feel dismissed. I don't know. Like, why? I don't know.
Well, and I mean, that kind of comes back to the same like subconscious part too, right? And it's like part of the deal with generational trauma is you're not aware of it until you are, right? And so it's like this isn't at all excusing anything that your dad did, but like, I don't know that there's hate behind it, because sometimes for hate to be there, it's like, certainly some of the things he did sounded intentional, but it's like, if you think about whatever happened to him, and there's a lot you don't have there because he wouldn't share that with you, even if you asked, but it's like, you go back enough generations and it's like, what's everybody actually reacting to? Right.
Yes.
Because it's like, there's a physical and actual DNA component to generational trauma. And it's like, if you take, 10, 15 generations back, that's already like hundreds of years, but it's like, what were those folks going through, and what epigenetics happened that passed it on to their offspring, right? And the idea is like, you think about, we'll just go to, medieval times, right? There was a lot of bad stuff going on there, right? A lot of barbaric human activity.
Right.
And so then you think about some peasant living in medieval Europe who, gets abused by the guards or whoever, that they come and collect taxes, they beat you up, they take your stuff. If you don't have enough money, you see your neighbor's head on a pike outside the city center,
geez.
right?
Yeah, I'm going to miss Bob.
Right. And so it's like, there's all this stuff just constantly happening that's like causing anxiety and fear. And that activates different genes in you so that you can be more capable of handling that. Mm-hmm. And then you have kids and they have that gene activated, but they haven't experienced all this, but they have some of those same feelings.
Yeah.
And so then they go through their lives reacting to things or having certain feelings that they don't necessarily understand unless those things come into their life too. And even then they don't necessarily understand it, but they might be more well prepared for it.
Right.
And so if you just go generation after generation of, adding in new traumas, but also having unresolved old traumas, then you get to the point of like, okay, well, we're 10 generations later and I'm an anxious and depressed mess, but I have no idea why.
Right.
I just wake up and feel terrible, or there's like, things going on.
Yeah.
And it's like, it might be lost to history, like what's actually going on.
Right.
But part of being able to like fix that is notice it and figure out how to get your nervous system to settle down.
Yeah.
And so then bringing that back to your dad, it's like, we go back far enough, it's like, who knows? Like, there's all sorts of family history things that could have led to maybe he just got all of it, right? And then his own experiences activated enough different things that he's just not okay.
Maybe he's just sick. Not
Probably.
just sick. I mean, he's clearly sick, but...
Yeah, but that's what it is for most people.
Yeah.
If you take any person that's, you know, not doing well, and whether they seem malicious or, you know, hateful or like whatever it is, there's a lot more going on there than, you know, they're sometimes or frequently willing to admit. And so it's like it just takes the people who can catch it and be aware of themselves enough to like turn it around.
There's a part of me that's so fucking angry though, that it's like, why was I smart enough and got my shit together enough and did the work? I put in the work for myself so that I'm not that to my children.
Good.
And it's kind of a feeling of anger. And then like also I'm spreading awareness on it, right? Like we're talking about it, and it just pisses me off so much. It's like, why couldn't you have done this for me? Why couldn't you have done this for yourself? And so maybe we don't know where his trauma came from, but I know where a good portion of my trauma came from. Yeah. And it's like, I think that there's just this deep need for me too. I just want him to acknowledge it. Just acknowledge the fucked up shit you did. Like, I am the last person that is afraid to apologize. Like, I apologize to my children constantly. Because when you model apologizing and healthy apologizing, then they in turn learn what healthy apologies are. I never expected it, but it's like, why the fuck can't he just look at me and be like, you have created so much. You are so successful in spite of the fucking hell I put you through. Why does he have to hate? He hates that I'm successful. He fucking hates it. What? This is such a fucked up. And here I am, 33 years old, a therapist, a midwife, an RN. I have my own coaching business, and I still have these same father wounds that I'm sitting here talking to my friend on my podcast about, right? Because it's like, what the fuck? Like, I deserved better, and like anybody else that was in my position deserved better too.
True.
Yeah. But also it's our mess to clean up.
Right.
And that sucks too.
Right. And it's like, maybe he will someday. Maybe someday he'll acknowledge it and he'll understand.
When I've brought it up, though, he'll be like, I did say sorry 5 years ago. I'm like, I need a lot of sorries. I need, like, I think about it. And even Eloise to this day. So we were in Dollywood for a work trip. And I am a freaking whore for stuffies. Oh my God, I'm a stuffy slut. I love stuffies. We can never have too many stuffies. And so, Eloise, we're in Dollywood. She's like, can I get that stuffy? I'm like, okay, yeah. She's like, can I get that stuffy? I'm like, fuck yeah, let's get that one too. And so Eloise's friend, my friend Abby, one of my best friends, Abby, who's our COO, her son, Caden, shout out to Caden. Hi, Caden. I know you're watching this with your mom. I love you. He's like, why do you buy so many stuffies for her? And I told him the truth. I said, once when I was younger, I got in trouble and my dad went through my room and he threw away all my stuffies and dolls and all of my toys. And he made me sit on the step and watch as the garbage truck came and took them all away. Mm-hmm. And I told Caden that story. I'm like, so now I just like to get a lot of stuffies as an adult. And Eloise heard that and she immediately went and was like, I want to win that stuffy, Mom. And so like she won it and she gave it to me and I didn't even realize she'd heard the story. Yeah. But she brought me the stuffy and she goes, I know your daddy threw all your stuffies away, but I won you this new one. And so does that help you feel happy, Mom? And I said, yeah, it does. Yeah. And then I said, Eloise, did you know that sometimes we have wounds and ouchies, we call them ouchies on our hearts, that people left. But when you do kind things like that, it's like medicine for our hearts. Yeah. I said, you just gave Mom some medicine. She goes, oh, good. I love doing that. And it's like, it's so cool to see that, like, I'm so connected with my kids and it's so different. It's kind of like I get to reparent the child that's inside of me too. Yeah. And it's such a beautiful experience. It's really amazing. Do Do you want to talk about anything else? Do you want to talk about, like, I feel better. I feel like I just had a good therapy session. Thanks for listening.
I wanna hear Adam's theory on, do you think it's healthy to cut people like that out of your life and try to move on, opposed to trying to have the inner forgiveness and
I want to ask it my own way.
Try to keep incorporating them.
Okay.
I want Adam to ask about it.
No, I'm going to ask that question. So I'm estranged from both my parents just because I can't handle it. But
Sure.
We have tried before, and I have a lot of grief because what I am missing most, I have the most amazing relationship with my children, but what I'm missing most is having a mom or dad to share it with. Yeah. Like, I'll get emotional because it's like, I have created the most amazing people on the planet, right? And so it makes me sad that there's not even an interest there.
Yeah.
But to my dear friend Zach's question from Indiana, what are your thoughts on estrangement, or if you just can't have a healthy relationship with this person, at what point do you think that you stop trying to pursue that?
I don't know that there's like a very specific definable way to say that, because it's like, it's, as with most things, it's going to depend on what it is, but it's like, certainly if there's safety concerns that like really seem like there can't be anything done about it, then that's probably one defining feature of when it's time. But otherwise it's like, you know, I've worked with people that have like semi-estranged relationships where it's like they mostly don't talk, but sometimes they see each other and it like can be okay, but it's like I'm not going to say estrangement's good or bad, because that also depends, right?
Yeah,
and
it's so like, situation dependent.
Right. And a lot of the time it's like it's usually done for a pretty good reason. And there are ways that things can be reconciled, but like with the relationship, it's going to require effort from both parties in order to like recover it. And if one party is completely unwilling to participate in that, then it's like, okay, then how long are you going to keep trying? How much of your time and effort and life energy are you going to put into trying to create this relationship when the other party has zero interest in doing that, or is at least putting zero effort into it? Because then it's like at some level you're leading yourself on.
Yeah. And
it's still confusing there, because it's like to say to give up hope is also like depressing on its own. So it's like you need to do what you need to do and also be fair to yourself and your kids.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like if you chase after a broken and lost relationship your whole life, and then those parents die.
Yeah.
But you never got to reconcile that. How old are you now, and how old are your kids, and how much have you missed out with them because you were chasing yours?
Yeah. That's really powerful. Yeah.
To be able to accept the loss, right, can save, like, it creates its own heartache.
Yeah.
But it can save a lot of other stuff, because it's like, what's in front of you right now? Whether that's your kids or your spouse, partner, or friends, right? And that's part of why I think an important thing for people to know is like when your birth family or your blood family is like broken or not healthy, and whether they're already estranged or on the path to that, like there's also chosen family, right? And like as humans, we're social animals and we're supposed to like be around other people at varying levels. But like if you don't have blood family around that you're close with and that are good for you, like you can choose your family in other parts of your community.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yes, there's kind of this ideal of, I want my parents to be in my life and to be important and to love me and for me to have a good relationship with them. And if that's not possible for one reason or another, it doesn't mean that you can't still have similar things. Like, I think it seems like especially in America, there's been a lot of like, I don't know, we've separated the generations a lot. And so then that makes it so that it's like, oh, we're all just around similarly aged people. And that means that each generation is missing out on the things from the other people. Because it's like, you know, I know that there's like, oh, Gen X and millennials and boomers and Gen Z and just everyone, you know, labeling people and sort of ostracizing them and claiming their own as their, you know,
fuck
this
you,
is my
millennials.
tribe. Right.
Fuck you, Gen Z. Fuck you, boomer. Yeah.
Right. But it's like, well, you know, if you think about it, if we kept relations better, and within families, it's probably usually better, but then also like depending on different communities, there's more layering, I guess is what I could call it. And so then it's like, it's already there, but it seems like just in general, it's rather split, but it's like, there's wisdom to gain from every level there. And it's like, if you don't have parents around for whatever reason, again, like there's also other older folks that could be, you know, not adoptive parents, but surrogates in a way, right? And it's like being able to find these communities and chosen families are ways to like create a support network of people that you can connect with and get similar things out of in terms of, you know, love and well-being.
What would you like? So that still leaves this part of me, though, that it's like, okay, I think I need to stop pursuing that, like, because it has taken a lot out of me. But then understanding that truly my dad just has no interest in me or my kids. It's not something. And so to be able to swallow that, like, I am someone's child and I am unlovable to them. That's like a hard truth to see. And even if it's not about my lovability or how anything to do with me, it's about his inability to love me the way a father should love his daughter. Yeah. It still leaves this wound of like, what the fuck is wrong with me? I mean, it's a fucked up thing when you're like, my parent doesn't want anything to do with me. Like, I could never imagine feeling that way about one of my kids.
Right.
I look at any one of my kids and it's like, there is nothing that they could do. Nothing. I'm truly nothing. Even down to like taking that would make me not have an interest in them. That would make me not need to know they were safe, you know?
Yeah.
And where's the disconnect? Is the disconnect something that I did, or is the disconnect something that he doesn't have?
Well, it's got to be something he doesn't have. Or something in him, because it's like there's if you take just any human to human interaction, right, there ideally is some like base level of love and respect of just like, oh, you're another human, like let's be okay together.
Yeah.
And so then when you take something more significant as like parent to child relationship, it's like, what's not okay in him that he's unable to do that? So then it's not about what you've done or who you are or anything. And part of being able to leave that where it is also being able to, even though the things you've talked about today, how bad they are and like really bad and not acceptable.
And like any adult would go to prison for doing that to someone.
Right.
That's assault. I think it's safe to say I was very abused.
Yes. Being able at some level to forgive that, right? And it's like, that sounds sometimes dirty or icky, like, I'm not going to forgive that. It's like, but it's not that you're saying it's okay. It's not that you're saying that what happened was acceptable, but forgiving it to be like, I understand that you're not okay and you didn't know any better. And if you did, you still made the choice to be this way, but holding on to it, right, is part of what keeps you there anyway. Yeah. And so being able to let that go for yourself and be like, you know, forgiving him at some point, right, will help release it and make it so that you can leave that where it was and move forward.
It's so much easier for me to just think like, he's sick, he can't.
Well,
he's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Correct.
not that just like makes it so much not about me. Like there are some
Correct.
people that they cannot walk no matter how many pep talks they're given, no matter how much physical therapy they do, they will not be able to walk.
Right.
And I think you just really helped me like pack that up nicely and put it on a shelf. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. You're amazing. Thank you for being here.
Sure thing.
Can I read my momedy to you?
Okay.
Okay.
Try to make it within a minute.
It's going to be shorter than that. So this is what Eloise said the other day. She goes, and it kind of is appropriate. She goes, if you could have anybody be your daddy, who would you choose? And I said, definitely Ozzy Osbourne. He is so cool. And she goes, really? Why is he so cool? Can he do a cartwheel? And that's my... Kids are the best.
Guess I'm not cool then.
Can you do a cartwheel?
No. That's why I'm not cool.
That's why you're not cool. But Ozzy actually could at one point on stage.
I mean, I believe that.
Yeah, but I just thought it was great. Like, you would want him to be your daddy because you think he's cool. Okay, he's cool. Can he do a cartwheel? Like, I love it. I love it. Just, yeah. Thank you for being here.
Sure thing.
And this is Adam with MindMomBodyRN. You can hit him up and he will do the same thing that you just saw him do with me, with you. Hopefully it's not as heavy, or if it is, it's fine. Adam can, he's very skilled. And so thank you, and we will see you next time.